So in 1898, the United States wins a war against Spain. Pretty straightforward, right? But what if I told you that winning those battles actually meant losing something much, much bigger? We're going to dive into a really provocative critique from 1899 by a sociologist named William Graham Sumner. His argument that America, right at its moment of triumph, was about to be conquered by the very ideas of the empire it had just defeated.
And boom, there it is. That's his central, absolutely stunning claim. I mean, can you imagine? The victory parades are barely over, and Sumner comes out with this. He's saying the real war wasn't fought with ships and guns, but on the field of ideas. And on that field, he was convinced America was about to wave the white flag.
So this sets up the really fascinating paradox we're going to unpack first. How on earth could a huge military victory possibly lead to a deep philosophical defeat? Okay, to really get this, you have to picture the scene. The Spanish-American War ends, and suddenly the U.S. is in charge of new places overseas, like the Philippines and Puerto Rico. This victory just kicks off this massive nationwide debate. What now? Do we become a global empire? Well, Sumner, who was a big voice in the anti-imperialist camp, saw this as a huge red flag. He thought it wasn't a sign of strength at all, but a dangerous U-turn away from what the country was supposed to be about. Now, for Sumner, this wasn't just a simple policy debate. No, he saw it as a full-blown conflict between two totally opposite worldviews, two national symbols that were basically in a fight for the soul of America.
And look at how clearly Sumner lays out the stakes here. On one side, you've got the American symbol. A nation literally born from a revolt against an empire, built on ideals like self-government and liberty. And on the other side, the Spanish symbol. To him, that was the textbook definition of imperialism, driven by what he called national vanity and greed. His point was simple. You can't be both. You have to pick one.
And let's be really clear about Sumner's definition here. For him, imperialism wasn't just about grabbing more land. It was a seductive lie. It's a philosophy that whispers these promises of glory and riches in your ear. But in reality, he saw it as the exact same poison that had brought the once mighty Spanish Empire crashing down. So that brings us to our third section, what Sumner called the imperialist betrayal. He was convinced that the second America decided to become an empire, it had no choice but to betray its own core beliefs. I mean, he puts it so plainly. It's a trade-off. You can't have it both ways. To go for the Spanish model of empire, you have to, by definition, throw away the American model of a self-governing republic. He saw it as a conscious and totally tragic choice. And he gets really specific about what this betrayal looked like in practice. He argued the war wasn't some noble cause, it was just a cynical political game, rushed into without any real thought. And here's the kicker. To justify ruling over people in places like the Philippines without their consent, America had to ditch its own fundamental belief that all men are created equal, and instead adopt the old colonial idea that, well, some people just aren't cut out for liberty. Now, this betrayal wasn't just philosophical. Sumner had some pretty dire predictions about the real, tangible costs of heading down the path of empire. You can see his whole chain of logic laid out right here. It's like a domino effect. It starts with a choice. Adopt imperialism. Okay, well, to maintain an empire, you need a big, permanent military. That huge military, it costs a ton of money, which means debt and higher taxes. And all this focus on foreign adventures, it's a great way to distract everyone from the problems you have at home. And the final domino to fall, the weakening of democracy itself. It's a 5-step slide from a republic to a militaristic state. Think about that image. Sumner didn't see a large military as a symbol of strength. He saw it as a parasite on the nation. It just eats up a country's wealth, its talent, and its energy, all resources that could be going into schools, new inventions, and just making life better for your own citizens. He saw it as a constant drag on actual progress. So, if the people don't benefit, who does? Sumner's answer was pretty blunt. The plutocracy, the wealthy elite. He called imperialism a grand onslaught on democracy because it's set up to benefit a powerful few. It creates all these opportunities for corruption and government contracts, what he called jobbery, all while keeping the public distracted from what the powerful are up to at home. And the bill for all of this? Yeah, that always falls hardest on the average person. And beyond all the money and the politics, there's this psychological price. Sumner talked about this thirst for glory like it was a disease, an epidemic he called a pest of glory. It's this intoxicating feeling that makes a nation arrogant and reckless. It makes people rely on emotion instead of reason, and it ends up corrupting a country's judgment and blinding it to what's really in its best interest.
Okay, so this all leads to a final, inescapable dilemma. Now that the US has these new territories, what is it actually supposed to do with them? Sumner argued there were only two roads forward, and both of them led to disaster.
All right, so here's option number one. You can rule them as colonies, as mere possessions, and deny the people there the very rights you claim for yourself. But if you do that, well, you've become the very thing you once rebelled against. You've become Spain. You've betrayed every single principle of liberty your nation was supposedly founded on. And the other option? It wasn't any better in his eyes. You could bring these new places into the country as equal states, but Sumner warned that trying to absorb millions of people with completely different cultures, languages, and political traditions would just overload and break the American political system itself.
So what this all boils down to for Sumner is that there was no good way out of this mess. Zero. Not a single good option. He saw the initial conquest as a massive blunder precisely because it created a problem with no good solution. His only answer, cut your losses. Give the territories their independence and just let them figure out their own future.
So Sumner's essay is really a time capsule, isn't it? It's this powerful warning from way back at the turn of the 20th century. But it leaves us with a question that still just hangs in the air. How does any nation balance that seductive call of power and glory on the world stage with the fundamental principles it claims to live by at home? It really is a timeless dilemma.